Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the Reinventing the Classroom conference. This is such a fun event for us, and I have to say I'm just so delighted to have Anne Mirtschin here speaking to us from Australia as our second keynote. Anne, welcome. Yeah, I actually count Anne as a friend, and that's part of one of the amazing aspects of the internet is the ability to develop a friendship, only seeing each other in person maybe once a year. Huge, huge thanks to ClassFlow for supporting this event. We're so excited and so appreciate their support making this event for free. Thanks to Blackboard Collaborate for the platform that allows us to connect in this way. There is a survey at the end of the session. When you fill that survey out, there's a link to ClassFlow. You can also go to classflow.com. Please support them as they've supported us. This is a chance for those of you who are in our live audience to let us know where you're participating from. Look to the left of the map for the star icon. It's the second one down. Double click on it and then click on the map. Give us tell us about where you are, the time, the temperature. Oh, Michelle from ClassFlow is here. Welcome, Michelle. So, North America, South America, Australia, New Zealand. You've got to love it. Europe, Asia, wow. Is there anybody from Africa? That would really make our night, wouldn't it? Okay, keep those locations coming in the chat. And I'm going to move us forward here. So Anne is coming in from Australia. She's on holiday today, so her internet connection from home is not as strong as normal, so she's not going to use the webcam video. And if she drops off, we will wait and entertain you until she comes back, but hopefully her connection will stay strong. I can see right now she's running the audio setup wizard, so I'll do a little bit of tap dancing here while she gets prepared in that way. Looks like Canada, North Carolina, Mexico, New Zealand. Anne, are you back? I saw you were using the audio setup wizard.
Hello, Steve. I'm back. I just want to get rid of that little red microphone next to my name. So, yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Okay. We're turning the time over to you, Anne. We'll watch the chat, and then when you're ready for Q&A, let us know, and we'll help you out.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for coming to this session. I hope we can all reinvent the classroom together, because that's how we have to do it, with this wonderful network that we can create and that people like you provide. So I'm going to talk to you about amazing eClassrooms. So if you look at the screen, there's a little code, a QR code. If you have a smart device, oh, I've got some of my wonderful contacts here. So I just see Veronica from Malaysia here as well. So thanks, everyone. There's a QR code on that slide. So your smart device will take you to the Google document that I've set up. Or if you click on this link here, a lot of the resources or links to what I'm talking about are on this document. But I'm hoping that you will all add to that same document so we can create a rich resource for others and ourselves if they would also like to be part of the amazing eClassrooms. So I shall just move on to the next slide and hope that you've grabbed either the link, the bit.ly link, or that code. First of all, a little bit about me. I teach in southeastern Australia at a place called Hawkesdale P12 College. I live on a farm. My husband is a sheep farmer, and our students mostly live on farms as well. So we are remote geographically and culturally, but technology has provided with the most wonderful means to take learning beyond our walls. And I guess this is how a lot of my friends see me, through the eyes of a web camera, because it's too far for me and my students to travel long distances. It costs a lot, takes a lot of effort. So we link in via technology and we don't miss out on very much at all. First of all, I would like to introduce you to my family, because this has probably had a big impact on what I've learnt and what I know we can do. Two of my sons live overseas. This is my oldest son, Jonathan, and his young son, Benjamin. I learn what they're doing. I stay in contact with what they're doing by using Skype, Viber, which is an app that you can put on your smart devices, and it allows video conferencing, updating messages and photo sharing. Facebook, WhatsApp, which is a similar app to Viber, and Instagram. So I'd love you in the chat to tell me which of those you use as well. But this was Christmas time, so my second son lives in London. So this is Jason and his wife Katrina. They didn't miss out on opening up the presents, even though it was still Christmas Eve for them. They still were able to come in for our Christmas Day and watch the excitement, learn what we were doing via Skype. So learning is changing very much now. It's becoming global, very much mobile for our students, because most of their learning often takes place outside the classroom. It's digital and it's virtual. I tried to take a photo of a traditional classroom in my school yesterday, but you know, I couldn't see what I would call a traditional classroom in use. So I would love you all to, instead of taking a photo, let's write what it would look like, or if you've got a photo to drop there would be great. So if you look on this toolbar to the left of this slide and look for that letter A, can we give you a minute? Let's share our ideas on what a traditional classroom would look like. So click on the letter A, then click on the whiteboard. Or if that doesn't work for you, just put it in the chat and we'll have a look there. So help me build that photo without having the photo. And I'll tell you why I couldn't get the photo in the school. Our students have got one-to-one devices. Most of them were using it yesterday. Very few of the classes looked like this desks in rows. They were rearranged everywhere. The science rooms were all doing experiments, etc. So I just didn't get the photo. That's great, because that's exactly as I see it. I should also mention that I was born before technology. I was born before television. So I was absolutely taught in a traditional classroom with inkwells, pen and nibs, etc. So I bet there's not too many in here today that have faced that. Thank you. Any more ideas? So we've still got the circle tables as seen as traditional, although I think that's sort of starting to encourage the group work, which is what we love to get. Yeah, don't get out of your seat. That was my day, and we even had the day of the strap when I was a student. Okay, I'm sorry if you're still writing, but I'd love to put your ideas in the chat, because I'm going to keep moving. Let's give ourselves another minute. What would the eClassroom look like in comparison? So if we just put the timer on again for a minute, what do you think the eClassroom would look like? Because I think this is where we start to reinvent our classroom, as many of you have and are doing. Oh, I love that noisy term, because I often think my classes are far too noisy, but you know they're learning, sharing, having fun for some of the time, much of the time. On the iPad, I think you can just use the chat. Sorry, Gabriella. So if you're on an iPad, just chat away in the chat. Steve might come back and just verify that, because I don't think you can write on the whiteboard. Steve may not be here. If you're dropping out of the room, you may need to pull back your connection speed. Oh, wow, I love this board too. Lots of things happening here now. So even though I call it an eClassroom, some of these things are probably leading towards what the eClassroom can do as well. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds, and then I'm going to start sharing some of the eClassrooms that I've been involved in. I tried to use some new ones, things I've been involved in this year, because many of you would have heard some of my presentations in the past, and I like to share what's going on that's new and might motivate us even further. In our school, our students have one-to-one devices. First of all, we started with these netbooks. But I'd like you to have a look. This is the back gate of our school. So it shows you how rural and possibly isolated we are. The largest town is 30 minutes away. Some of our students never go shopping. They never go to our capital city. They just very much stay in their either small country towns or farms. Our older students have now got laptops, and they've had to provide part of the cost of those, and the school has helped them out with the other. This one here is one of the first amazing classrooms that my students joined. These students are working with a Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. So for each week, over 10 weeks, a different member would come in virtually through a tool like this, Blackboard Collaborate, and they would play their instrument for the students. The students had the chat, just like you guys have got the chat. And they could give them feedback on what they were playing like, which they don't normally get when they do it professionally, because the audience simply claps or perhaps makes a noise when they're bored. But the students were very quick to give them whether they liked what they were hearing or not. And the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra people were also able to answer the questions that the students had. They created little sound stories for the students, and then mine were able to put them together into a big musical story at the end. So for us, we very rarely get to hear the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. So to be able to hear them through our computers one-on-one was an amazing experience for us. Let me see, now I'm getting problems moving slides. So Amy, I don't know if you're with me, or Steve, are you able to just move the next slide? Thank you. I hear so often, and I backed that other one, so often, do we make, or do we only use technology when it fits the curriculum? But I would like to say no. I think we should constantly use technology to make the curriculum fit that and build a whole new pedagogy for learning. And I'm going to tell you why now. I'm going to start with some more examples of how I use some of these tools in the classroom. So even though I've got my students face-to-face, we actually log in to Blackboard Collaborate. So my Department of Education has bought a major license for Blackboard Collaborate, and it allows me to book rooms that I can send a link to my students to. They log in. I love Blackboard Collaborate, or there's other virtual classrooms around as well. I can use emoticons, or the students can. They can tell me if they like what they hear, if they're confused. This is one of the most valuable features here, the back channel, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. I can record, send big files to my students without them having to grab it from elsewhere. It's got an interactive whiteboard, etc. I love the recording feature, because that means if my students are in hospital, they can actually listen to the recording, or they can actually come in to the classroom if they've got access to their device. So we do revision classes at night time from home. So if students can't get in, they just grab the recording link, you just press that play button and they can hear the lesson again. Or maybe they didn't understand what they were learning, so they can rewind and replay until they understand the topics that are being discussed. But it's this back channel feature, just like you people are using the chat, that is amazing to me. We were talking about the backs. This time we had an external presenter, and we had 3 schools linked up from Victoria. But the students were able to ask all these questions about the backs, and look what they wanted to know. So even though the topic was structured, they had all these other things they wanted to know. So the presenter stopped and answered all those questions for these students. When we teach our students face-to-face, they've probably got similar questions going, but only a few will put their hands up and actually ask those questions. So all these other options may never be answered for the students. The other way in which I think a virtual classroom is changing the pedagogy is that students can straight away, at the time when I'm explaining, I forgot to tell you, I teach computers, or ICT, I teach accounting, and I teach business management. So when I'm teaching accounting in a tool like Blackboard Collaborate, as soon as a student didn't understand what I said, in the chat will go, don't confuse me, or I don't understand that point. So I stop right there and try and rephrase it until a student does understand. If I hadn't done that, those students would have gone through that topic most likely without ever understanding what the basic elements of it were. Another way in which we've used it this year was for Bullying No Way, or National Day of Action Against Bullying and Violence, which I think is an Australian day. So we were looking at that topic for the day. We find students in our school are being bullied a lot of the time, both outside school, sometimes in school. We really want to stamp down on that. But I thought if we looked at a few videos and then we had a class discussion, many of the students who were actually bullied would not have a voice. I'd love someone to drop the link back into the Google Doc, because I put a lot of the resources in there rather than share the links in Blackboard Collaborate chat. So I set up a Blackboard Collaborate room, and the students were asked to write on the whiteboard or in the chat how it feels to be bullied. So I had only 13 students in my class, but I got 13 responses. So normally 2 hands might have gone up and told me, but by putting them in a virtual classroom where they're comfortable with the chat, they've each got a voice, I straight away got all these ways in which they, or how they feel when they're being bullied. And it was this one from a girl who I thought was very popular and would never be bullied, that I started to think we all feel, unfortunately, the force of bullying. But it made us all feel sad. You feel so bad that you want to crawl into bed and never come out again. So on the spur of the moment, after we finished that formal lesson, the students wanted to create their own video on what they'd learnt from each other about how bullying felt. So we're hoping we can get parental permission to put that back up on the anti-bullying site, maybe share it with our school community, and maybe on YouTube. The other thing I love, now this is also in Blackboard Collaborate using the video option, but you can use any tool that you've got at your disposal. So Skype, Google Hangouts, etc. can all be used. But a class of grade 5 students we're having a virtual Easter hat parade. So this is one of our big festivals in Australia and many of the other countries who are represented here today. The students in this school were creating Easter hats. So not only were they able to do a physical parade and be judged, they were able to show my Year 7 students through Blackboard Collaborate their wonderful creations and talk about them. But my students could actually ask questions in the chat, and they were able to respond to them there, so the learning continued. We then decided that we did have 40 students in the room. We decided to all get onto the whiteboard and decorate Easter eggs. So that's what it looked like at the end of everyone trying to draw their Easter eggs together. But I think it shows that you can mix age groups quite easily and readily when you're in a virtual classroom. They all love to learn from each other. It was also Read Aloud, World Read Aloud Day this year, about 5 weeks ago. So our time zone is not very good for linking up with a lot of countries, but Asia is on the same sort of school times, and of course Australia is. So my students were all given or told to find a book that they could read. So these students are 15, 16-year-olds. They had to find a book to read to 5-year-olds. And the 5-year-old students are on a remote cattle station in the Northern Territory of Australia. So the students found their book, they practiced their reading, they practiced presenting to the video camera, making sure they were speaking slowly, clearly, making sure the pages and pictures of their book could be seen, and that, yes, it was with Jasmine. So we had a great session then. So some of these students have got very poor literacy skills, but they all practiced their book, they all read well, and this just shows what it looks like at the other end. These are the girls as they appeared over Skype as they read their book to students. But you could do that within your own school. You could actually be online and read to other students. Another day that we celebrate at the very beginning of our school year is Safer Internet Use Day, and this is probably one of the first things as teachers we want, to make sure that our students are kept safe. So this time we had an amazing classroom. We had schools from all of these areas in Victoria. So the classes were asked to label where they were from, and this is the stats. We only had one classroom with one teacher or presenter, but in that virtual classroom there were 170 physical classes logged in, 17,000 students, and there was even a class of deaf students listening because their teachers were doing sign language as the slides were being shown. So, special students. Students with special needs, etc., do not have to miss out on learning because of their potential disability. This shows some of the slides that were being shown for that presentation. There was a blog set up after, so students were encouraged to put their comments back on the blog and add posts to that. This is what it looked like in our school. So it was only classes logged on, not individual students. Students went up to their interactive whiteboard, the teacher logged on, and they were able to take part in the Safer Internet Use Day. But when we have a back channel on a global scale, it gets even more interesting. So a class in Malaysia, a government school, has ICT at the same time as my 9-10 students. So when we can, we actually link up together in real time, share topics, share our whiteboards, get in the chat, learn from and with each other. But what is interesting is some of the comments that come up. So this is one of our Malaysian students. They shiver when they're talking in front of people. And I think that's true for so many of us. But if they've got the chat, they're comfortable. They're used to that. They're willing to prepare, share, and ask questions. And one of my students immediately chatted back, yep, they're the same. So here's just a little snippet from the back channel. The Malay students were actually sharing presentations on what they'd learnt in ICT. So one of the topics was firewalls. So they actually shared via their web camera through Blackboard to Collaborate their presentation. And my students were logged in, and you can see the sort of support students are giving to that student, actually saying they didn't know that before, but I love comments like this. This is a fun room. And when students are having fun, they learn so much more and are engaged. And this is what they remember from the last Linkup. This is some of the things they talk about in the chat. Soccer, their favourite music. Some of the students both like Korean bands. My school is really lucky because our Department of Education has actually given us what's called Polycom equipment. So this is high standard definition video. But again, it very much depends on the bandwidth of how good that definition is. So in the chat, I'd love you, or with a tick, to tell me whether you have access to this. But please remember, you can do it exactly with Skype, Google Hangouts, etc. Just that we've got this, and it does make our visuals a little bit better when we're sharing with each other. So this is another virtual parade. These students are from a school 2.5 hours drive away from me. They were sharing cultures, and they had a special cultural day. So the students came up one at a time, told us, or we had to guess what culture they were from, and then they explained why they were dressed that way, why they represented that culture too. But I love the engagement. These are young students, grade 3, 4. I love looking at the engagement of these students. They are listening, they are learning, and they are watching very closely. But not only that, we can actually get external speakers in. So this teacher was from Sydney, and her name was Miss Delightful. So she is 10 hours drive away from us. Our primary school students don't have specialist art teachers, but Miss Delightful is a specialist teacher. So she taught the students how to create clay masks on their favourite book character, or a book character that they wanted to copy. And you can see how we had to set up the room. We had to get the materials together. She used a document camera at times to share and show. And the students were able to finish their masks, have them fired, and take them home. In Australia, we have Anzac Day, where we remember our war veterans. So we've just had that on April the 25th. So we have a special service. Students bring flowers from home. We drape our Australian flag over the steps, and the students lay their flowers on the flag. But last year, near Anzac Day, we had Mark Wilson, an artist, come in and share how his drawing. He actually did the drawings for a book called A Day to Remember, which is about war and wartime heroes. So he showed the students how to sketch using a document camera that was actually projected on the interactive whiteboard. But again, any video conferencing tool would allow you to do this. He showed them his sketch work. The students were then, with their pen and paper or pencil, listening, learning, and then they applied what they'd learnt to their own sketches. And I thought they did a wonderful job of replicating what they'd learnt on the floor. Oh, I'd love someone to answer some of those questions in the chat, and I'd love those questions to go on the document because we could all share with that later. But one of the other schools was that linked up that day wanted to share further Anzac stories with our school. So we had a link up with a school in Lismore, which is 2 hours drive away. So the students shared their stories or their ancestors' stories. So this young girl brought her great-grandfather's war uniform to school and showed the badges that he'd actually earned, or the medals, I should say. Oh, these students also went to Canberra, where the War Memorial is, and they looked up some of the people that these students had mentioned in that session. So the learning can go way beyond those initial link-ups. This is another very special classroom that we enjoyed last year. It was Australian election times, and a school in Canberra invited us to participate in an election forum. This time it was done again through Polycom equipment. There were 7 schools around Australia linked up. Now remember, our school only has 150 students in the secondary section in total. We linked up with the Canberra school, which had hundreds of students. But there was also the politicians from Canberra and people who lead the political states present at this forum. One student from each school was given the opportunity to ask a question of his politicians, and they then had to answer them. So this was my small classroom linked in. This is the Year 12 students from Canberra who were in their auditorium. A student from a school in Canberra, etc., asking their questions of politicians. But not only did they ask their questions, they were also on Twitter as a back channel with that hashtag. And that meant the students every student could ask questions, give feedback on the responses. Now, my student asked whether they were going to give further funding to rural students who find it very expensive to go to town to study at university. But as she asked that question, the politicians answered it. But students here were saying, well, we find it expensive as well. So the discussions amongst the students continued in Twitter. Continuing some of these war-type themes, International Peace Day is celebrated each year in the world. And when I was young, we were in the Cold War, well, that's what we called it, with Russia. So I always find it amazing that I can connect with teachers in Russia, which I would never have dreamed as a child I could do. But Tatiana is a teacher who taught at a special school. But in this special school, they asked me to come and talk to them about what peace means to me. But there were teachers with these laptops in their hands, and they had students who had such severe disabilities that they couldn't physically come to school. But they didn't miss out on the presentation because they were beamed in via their teacher's Skype account. They could still see me talking and ask questions, etc. I love it when we can go global. I love it when we can have students from America, from Japan, from Australia, when we can have parents in there, grandparents in there, and students. So we can all come together in a classroom such as this, share together and learn together. So what we thought was impossible is now possible. My students used to come together at lunch times, those who are keen on learning to write, and they learned to write with an author from New York using Skype. So Skype is still one of my most favorite tools. It's user-friendly. Everyone in the world can access it and use it. So to me, it's still a great tool for connecting, collaborating, creating. But he used to set up a lesson for them each week. They would write their responses, share it in Evernote. He would look at their work, evaluate it, and give them feedback. But what an amazing connection for our students to have. A young girl in grade 6 from Boston, USA, came to my grade 3-4 class to teach them how to use Scratch. I don't know how to use Scratch very well, so it's a basic programming language for students. So she taught them how to use Scratch. She was home. It was the day before, the night before, and she had her parents with her. She taught my students how to use Scratch. They then created Sprites. Would you believe they remembered completely what she told them? They created these little Sprites for the World Museum site. It went on site. And the link is on the Google document for that. But my students, secondary students, also had a go at doing a global project with Scratch. But they pushed software in all directions, and they suffered issues and problems and questions that they couldn't solve. I couldn't answer their questions. So we Skyped in Lorraine Leo from Boston, who is an expert on Scratch. They introduced themselves to her using the front-end camera with Skype on the iPad. Then they reverted to the back or reverse camera, showed her what they were wanting to do. She could read their programming, help them and explain to them how to fix and actually get the outcome they wanted. They then passed Lorraine on to the next student who was having problems. So she became a mobile teacher. Roger, I hope I've answered those questions in the Google Doc, but Twitter, NINs like Classroom 2.0, Skype in education are where I found most of them. And David, I see you're there. You might be able to answer some of those and some of my other wonderfully close colleagues. Google Hangouts is free. It's another option for video conferencing. I think you can bring in 10 videos, but I'm in the country. So at home, I really struggle to stay in a gang out. If I'm at school, probably 3-4 videos at once will drop us out too. But it was International Peace Day. Grade 3-4s said what International Peace meant to them. They drew pictures on a piece of paper. And we very quickly and simply, with no rehearsal, no practice, so we don't have to be perfect, rehearsed. We just came to the web camera. Each student showed their picture on their piece of paper, shared what piece meant to them, and then the next person came on. And yes, so it was a footy day at our class. We were all dressed in our favourite football teams. So we're not in school uniform now. We're actually all in our favourite football teams. And Lorraine from America was in that Google Hangout. She showed what their class was doing for International Peace Day using Scratch. I want to show you these pictures because with America we find it so hard to interact in real time. But it doesn't really matter. Lorraine, the teacher that we saw before, she got her students to record a little song that my students were to learn. She shared the recording of the video of her students. My students listened to the video, and then they practiced with the American students. So we played the video and the song. My students watched what they did, sang along with them, and then we recorded us. So my school is Hawkesdale P12 College in southeastern Australia. So it's 10:36 a.m. here, and it's Thursday morning. So you guys can see immediately what time zones we're in. But then the American students sang with us too. They listened to my students because we made the video as well, and we all sang together, even though we weren't really together. But for students, the walls disappear. This is just to show what we can do even with our young students. So my grade 3-4 students went into a back channel. So we didn't have, we were connected with Skype, so we could see each other, but we could talk to each other in the back channel chat. So this is a new software tool that we discovered last year. So if you Google backchannel chat, you will find it. But we all logged on together, asked questions, and shared our favourite subjects, favourite foods. But I think you can see immediately, remember we're culturally isolated, so immediately we're starting to see different names, different foods that people eat, etc. But these students were preps. So these were only age 5 who were in there as pairs, and my student were grade 4-5, so they were about 10, 11 years old. As one of my older students says, you can't ask questions of a textbook, but look in the chat today at all the questions that have probably come in here. We can do it if we've got that back channel. Terry, if you've got a question, or is that just a misclick? I love these slides. We were practicing or wanting to test our connections because we have parent-teacher interviews or evening, and we wanted to show the parents what it looks like to connect with schools in other areas. So Sebastian was online from India, and he said he would Skype with us quickly to test it. But Sebastian's from India, and it was breakfast there, but it was lunch where we are. So they showed us what they had for breakfast, or were cooking for breakfast. So Sheena had cooked a green curry, which my students thought looked pretty good. And then she showed me, I'm not sure what these flat breads were called that she'd cooked. So again, my students had so many questions to ask them. But then the students at our school had baked a cake for this special parent evening. So I don't know if you can see the cake there, but it just shows what my setup is. I've only got my laptop. The girls are using the web camera from the laptop, projecting it onto the cake. So you do not need fancy equipment to do this. I could also then link in to the children in India when it was Children's Day. I don't know that we celebrate that in Australia, but some of these kids had never used a computer before, let alone Skype, let alone to talk to someone with a different accent, etc. But I think that was rather an amazing connection. We can do virtual excursions. So if you have a mobile device and an internet connection, you can actually show students where you are and take them and show them what it looks like. So this is Kerala in India, and I thought how beautiful their setting is. It looks rural, it looks really tropical, very pretty. So we get a really good idea of what things look like, sound like, and feel like when we connect. Just very quickly, I want to show you what can start with a simple photo. So when you connect with others, you don't have to Skype, backchannel, etc. You can share photos. So one of my friends, Reinhard from Germany, asked for a photo of our lunch boxes because his chemistry students in science were studying healthy foods. So I will let you work out if you think these are healthy lunch boxes or not. So it was lunchtime in our school when the request came through, so we quickly photographed 2 lunch boxes for him. He wanted to know where my school was, so I sent him to a school blog. And on the school blog, he noticed that we had a post about our school vegetable patch. He wanted to know if I would come in and teach his students about our vegetable garden, our canteen food, because our canteen uses the vegetables out the garden to cook lunchtime meals and recess meals. So I did that on 3 different occasions. I spoke to his students about what our canteen food was like, what the garden looked like. But then Reinhard asked me if we could have if they could do an Australian canteen food day, and I thought it'd be great if we could do a German food canteen day. But that meant we had to get our canteen managers together. But the canteen manager can't speak English. We can't speak German. So we used Skype. We had an interpreter. And we had the Year 7 English class in Germany listening. We showed some of the foods that we think are traditionally Australian. He showed us their German bread rolls, which are quite different to our Australian bread rolls, and wanted to know how we would get on trying to do some of the different recipes. At one stage, the teachers went out the room, so I felt like I was still actually supervising a German class. The kids were working quietly and well. But these students also had to interpret the recipes. So between the 2 managers, they decided which recipes they'd have a go at cooking. These students had to interpret the German to English and the English to German. We couldn't use abbreviations, and we had to be clear with the recipes. So the German students set up their canteen with Australian flags, etc. And we set up our canteen with some German posters and flyers. This was the menu that we decided on cooking in our canteen, and I grabbed this slide from a student who set it up. The German class also were doing a Madi Gras day. So this is a Google Hangout. So there are teachers judging the costumes from Nigeria, from Nepal, and me from Australia. So they came up, shared their costume. We had a spreadsheet that we marked immediately, a Google sheet, so they could see what their score was out of 10. But just on Monday night, the same students then shared the German islands and what they'd learnt about drinking water to me. And I live in Australia, the world's largest island, so I found this fascinating. Where did I learn a lot of the things that we do in class? I started with a flat classroom project, which are now flat connections project. So Julie Lindsay and Vicky Davis have been responsible for initially modelling these classrooms. But this is where my students in Year 11, who are 17-year-olds, can socialise on a Ning with students from Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, etc. You can see the engagement and the things that they have to do of what I think are rather amazing. So in a nutshell, this is what we do as part of those projects. We're now at the stage where we've got outsourced clips from kids in other countries, which is a really fun time for them. We're about to complete our movies and post it online, etc. And again, the student summits bring the students into a room like this. I want to show you now a class that we did at the beginning of the year. I brought in some grade 5, 6 students. So our school is prep to Year 12. So we have 5-year-olds through to 18-year-olds in our school. We linked up with 3 classes in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And we had a Japanese professor and his colleague Skyped in at the same time. We used his premium Skype account, and I think we had the best visuals we've ever had with Skype. The students in Thailand played their instruments to us first of all, and the music was quite different sounding to any of the music that we're used to. But what really had an impact on us was that these students had created Scratch projects. So they programmed in Scratch little stories about their culture. And for the first time, I think we started, or the students started to see the different languages. So this is the Thai language that they had to explain to us what it meant in English. And they also shared a story about Buddha. So we were starting to learn more about their religion and what, again, the different language that is being used. They also used Scratch to play us a musical story. So these kids were really creative and inventive, and it motivated my kids to do better and bigger things, etc. Now, this is not Spot Wally. This is Spot Me. Do you have toolbar access? Because I'd love some of you to say, can you find me on the whiteboard? Either draw an arrow if you can, or use an indicator. So these are little kindergarten students from Cape Town, South Africa. So they are only 3, 4, maybe 5. Someone's got me. There I am. So last night, on a spontaneous request from Living Maths or Steve Sherman, I Skyped kindergarten children, which I've never done before. And would you believe my grandchildren were with me? They were about to go home. So there I am there. This is the South African teacher. This is me on Skype. And my little William is 6 years old, and he was in a striped top. But it was his pajamas. So though it was lunchtime for these little ones, it was bedtime for Australia. So these little ones, young as they are starting to learn time zone differences. And then my little Ella, who is 5-year-old, came along. She's 4 years old. She met another Ella here, who is exactly the same age, and they shared the stories they liked to read together. We can make the impossible possible. These students are from Kenya, I hope I'm right, in the biggest slum in Africa, So look closely at their classroom walls, holes, pockets. I couldn't see any technology except the teacher, Livingston, is highly connected. He has a laptop. He brings these little students to the world and they learn from us. Imagine if we can push them out of their poverty levels, help them learn with us, from us, and we learn with them. So on that Google document, I've given you a link to a blog post I wrote. Look at how articulate they were. They sang songs for me. They showed me objects, etc. An amazing classroom. I'm finishing up now because I know the next keynote's about to start. These are some of the sites, some of the tools that have helped me connect, and people in the same classroom here now connect as well. So I started with Classroom 2.0, which is a Steve Hagedorn created site where I met a lot of people. I've met more in Twitter over the years, but Twitter wasn't invented then, and I love the site called Skype in Educate in the classroom. But there are so many. I'm just going to drop that Google document link in the chat because I've written a lot of this down there, and I'd love you to put any other questions there. I'm going to go back through the chat and see if I can answer some of those there if no one else did. But very quickly what it means, your teaching becomes very transparent if you go the video conferencing way. We can see the behavioural problems, but everybody has them. But we also can see the learning because it becomes transparent as well. And I find that students are so highly engaged that very rarely do we need to speak to them at all. My teaching becomes messy because I never know what's going to happen one day from the next. We get spontaneous learning, but this one, it is essential to be networked or to have some contacts that you can work with, learn with first of all, if you would like to do this and haven't done it. You teach on the fly. So I have a grab bag with me, which I'll just show you quickly. so that if people from other countries are linking up, I have a bag that I can quickly pull out some things to show them, like the Australian flag, etc. It is risk-taking, but I've never ever felt that I've never been successful. We learn together. There are some of my tips which I might put on that Google document later. I think this picture summarises it all. This is what the amazing classrooms can look like. The girls, the fair girls from Australia, the Asian students from Taiwan, sharing, learning, talking together. So that's my contact details. I don't know if it's time to go to the next session, so I'll give it back to Steve or Amy, whoever's looking after me. I'd love to hear from you, or you share your experiences, and please add to that Google Doc, because we'd love to get your ideas and build a rich document. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm clapping for you, and the way you do this is you hover over the icons in the participant window, look for the smiley face, then go down to the applause button. I say this every time Ann talks, and it's not exaggeration. Ann is one of my personal heroes. And every time you give a talk like this, I feel like you reveal something I didn't know about you that makes me even more proud that I know you. You're just terrific, and thanks for taking the time to do this, especially on a holiday. So if you want to download Ann's slides, you can do so by going to File, Save, and you save the whiteboard. And be sure to select the PDF version. If you're on a mobile device, you're probably not going to be able to do that, but you can do it from the full Blackboard Collaborate recording, which will go up in a couple of minutes. Just look at the recording page on the website. Her session will also be turned into a YouTube video, which should be up by tomorrow. We do have lots of other great sessions, one more tonight and then a full list tomorrow. And thanks for doing such a good job kicking us off.